What if the soldier mocked at boot camp for being too different? Turned out to be the one person with a past so dangerous that even a hardened SEAL commander froze at a single glance of her tattoo. This isn't just training, it's a test of identity, loyalty, and survival. Stick with me till the end, and if you love stories where the underdog flips the battlefield, make sure you hit subscribe right now, because this one will hit harder than a sniper's bullet. The first day at boot camp was never easy, but for her, it was war before the war even began. Recruits from every corner of the country stood in rigid lines, sweat dripping, voices cracking under the drill sergeant's commands. And then there was her, Elena Kane, a young woman with a quiet intensity, sharp eyes that studied every detail, and a silence that made others uneasy. The others whispered. They laughed when she stumbled during push-ups, chuckled when she didn't shout as loud during roll call, and smirked when she jogged slightly behind the group. To them, she was just a fragile outsider who didn't belong among men bred for battle. But no one noticed her hands scarred, steady, and precise, or the way she never flinched when the rifle cracked during firing drills. At night, when the barracks echoed with cruel jokes, she said nothing. She only sat on her bunk, tying her bootlaces with a discipline too sharp to be accidental. The SEAL commander, a man named Briggs, had seen hundreds of rookies, but something about her bothered him. It wasn't weakness, it was the calm. And calm, in the chaos of boot camp, was more terrifying than fear. The weeks at boot camp grew harsher, the sun rising over fields soaked with sweat mud, and the strained cries of exhausted recruits. And while most rookies broke down beneath the weight of endless drills, shouting sergeants, and the brutal obstacle courses that ripped open their palms and scraped their knees raw, Elena Kane endured with a silence that infuriated her peers. They mocked her when she lagged a step behind in formation runs, sneered when her voice cracked during chants, and laughed cruelly when her grip slipped on the rope climb. But what none of them noticed was how she always returned after lights out, staying behind in the empty field, practicing every climb until her arms trembled and her palms bled, crawling through the dirt until her elbows were bruised and raw, building herself in the shadows where no one was watching. And when the dreaded trial known as the fire arrived, designed to strip every recruit to their core, forcing them to drag a 160-pound dummy through mud and smoke while explosions thundered overhead and flares blinded the field, most stumbled in panic. But Elena moved differently, her body low, her breathing steady, her arms locking under the weight with a precision born of repetition, her pace unbroken, even as simulated gunfire cracked around her, every step executed with a rhythm that spoke not of desperation but of memory, as if this chaos was not new to her but something she had once lived in for real. And when a flare burst above her head, flooding the ground in harsh white light that made others falter, she didn't hesitate, rolling sideways, tightening her grip, pushing forward with a calmness that unsettled even the instructors. By the time she crossed into the safe zone and laid the dummy down with deliberate care, not collapsing like the rest but standing tall, her sleeve slipped back and the floodlights caught the ink on her arm, a lion coiled around a blade. A tattoo so distinct, so notorious, that Commander Briggs, watching from the shadows, froze in recognition, his heart lurching with the knowledge that this was no ordinary recruit, no struggling rookie mocked by children in uniforms, but someone marked by a past tied to the darkest corners of military rumor, the kind of unit whispered about in sealed reports and late-night strategy rooms, a ghost squad that wasn't supposed to exist. And as the barracks continued to laugh, blind to what stood before them, Briggs felt the air in his lungs tighten, for he knew he wasn't looking at a recruit being shaped into a soldier. He was staring at a soldier who had already been shaped by wars the rest of them couldn't imagine. From the moment Commander Briggs saw the tattoo etched into Elena Kane's arm, his perception of her shifted forever. For while the recruits still mocked her as the weak link, the outsider, the one they could laugh at to mask their own insecurities, Briggs knew better. He had seen that lion coiled around a blade before, buried in classified files stamped with red ink, whispered in briefings that ended with shredded documents, a mark belonging to a ghost unit that was never meant to exist, a covert squad whose missions erased entire villages and eliminated targets so cleanly that even governments questioned if those people had ever lived. And now that same symbol burned on the arm of a woman pretending to be an unremarkable trainee. His suspicion gnawed at him until one night he called her into his office, demanding answers with a voice that carried more fear than authority. But Alina only stood at attention, her silence like a wall of steel. And when pressed again, she gave no name, no story, no denial. Only the kind of empty stillness that said more than words ever could, leaving Briggs haunted by what she wasn't saying, by the ghosts hiding behind her eyes. And then, as if fate wanted to expose her further, the recruits were dispatched into a survival exercise deep in hostile terrain, carrying packs through mud and thickets when suddenly the sharp crack of real gunfire tore through the air. Not the blanks of training, but the cold precision of live rounds. And masked men surged from the tree line, subduing recruits with boots and fists, dragging one screaming into the dirt while the rest panicked and scattered like startled cattle. Yet in that chaos, Alina didn't freeze, didn't stumble, didn't hesitate. She moved like lightning, her knife sliding into her hand as though it had always been there, her body flowing into the fight with terrifying efficiency, disarming one attacker with a twist that shattered bone, dropping another with a brutal strike to the throat, her face calm, detached, as if this battlefield wasn't chaos, but memory, her every movement rehearsed in wars the others couldn't imagine. And while the recruits gawked in horror at the woman they had mocked now standing like a predator among prey, Briggs watched with a sick certainty that he was witnessing her true self emerge. A soldier forged in shadows, not shaped by his training, but by something far darker. And when the last of the intruders lay groaning or still, she cleaned her blade with methodical precision, ignoring the wide-eyed stares around her. And when Briggs finally stepped forward and asked in a voice barely above a whisper, "Who are you?" she answered with the kind of flat honesty that froze the blood in his veins. "No one you were supposed to meet." A statement that told him everything and nothing at once, confirming what he already knew, that Alina Kane was not here to learn how to be a soldier. She was hiding among them, carrying secrets capable of burning down governments. And the laughter of Bootcamp would never touch her again. The field was still littered with the echoes of chaos when the recruits returned to camp, their faces pale, their bodies trembling, their voices hushed as though speaking too loudly might summon back the masked men who had vanished into the forest. But none of them looked at Alina Kane the same way again, for where once they had seen weakness, they had now seen a predator in motion. A woman who had fought like war was her natural language, and even the most arrogant among them could no longer summon the courage to mock her. Instead, they avoided her eyes, as though meeting her gaze might reveal something they weren't ready to understand. Yet Commander Briggs couldn't look away, because the image of her tattoo burned in his mind with every blink, and the memory of her voice, "No one you were supposed to meet," echoed like a warning that he couldn't shake. So when he finally stood before the assembled recruits, his throat dry and his words weighed down by the truth only he fully grasped, he told them in a tone that silenced even the boldest joker, "Training's over. You'll say nothing of what happened here." And though confusion rippled across their faces, not one dared question him, because they had seen his expression and it was enough. Later that night, under the dim glow of his office lamp, Briggs pored over old fragments of classified memory, remembering stories of Black Ops programs disbanded without ceremony, their soldiers scattered into shadows, their names erased, their symbols like the lion coiled around a blade condemned to rumor. And he realized with a cold certainty that Alina Kane was one of those ghosts, not a recruit, but a survivor of a world so hidden even he, a seasoned SEAL commander, had only glimpsed its edges. And now she had chosen to bury herself inside his camp, maybe to disappear, maybe to wait, maybe to protect herself from enemies far greater than the fools who mocked her in the barracks. But whatever her reason, it was a reason he would never ask, because some questions, once answered, could dismantle everything. So he kept her secret, carried the weight of it alone. And as the weeks passed, The recruits whispered less, her legend growing silently in their eyes, until the only question left hanging in the silence of boot camp, unspoken yet etched into every mind, was the one that no answer could satisfy. Who is she?